The Nexus Dawn drifted through the void between stars, its sleek hull reflecting the distant light of alien suns. Captain Vex of the Alterian Navy had seen many species join the Galactic Union over his 3 centuries of service, but none quite like the newcomers scheduled to board his vessel today. Humans. The words still felt strange in his throat when he spoke it aloud. "Captain," his communications officer, Nira, announced from her station. "The human transport vessel is requesting docking permission." Vex straightened his forearms and adjusted his ceremonial sash. First impressions mattered in diplomacy, especially when dealing with a species that had somehow managed to achieve faster-than-light travel in less than a millennium after discovering fire. The Galactic Council was still debating whether humanity's rapid advancement was impressive or terrifying. "Grant permission. Alert all department heads to report to Docking Bay 7. The Nexus Dawn shuddered slightly as the human vessel connected. Through the viewport, Vex could see their ship, a patchwork of metal plates and jury-rigged components that looked like it had been assembled in someone's backyard. Yet their readings showed it was surprisingly efficient and, more disturbingly, heavily armed for a supposedly civilian transport. The airlock cycled, and the first human stepped aboard. Captain Jake Morrison was shorter than Vex had expected, standing barely 2 meters tall on just 2 legs. His skin was a pale pink color, and thin hair covered only the top of his head. But his eyes, those strange forward-facing eyes, held an intensity that made Vex's scales prickle with unease. "Captain Vex," Morrison said, extending one of his manipulator appendages. "It's an honor to serve aboard your vessel." Vex carefully grasped the human's hand, surprised by the firm pressure. In Alterian culture, such contact was reserved for combat challenges. "Welcome aboard, Captain Morrison. Your crew will be integrated into our departments according to Galactic Standard Operating Procedures." Morrison nodded, then turned to address the 20 humans filing out behind him. "All right, everyone. Remember what we discussed. We're here to learn, contribute, and represent Earth well." Vex watched the humans disperse to their assigned stations, noting how they moved with an odd efficiency. Unlike most species, they didn't cluster together for comfort in unfamiliar surroundings. Instead, they spread out immediately, their eyes constantly scanning their environment. "Sir," Chief Engineer Clox's voice crackled through the comm system. "The human assigned to my department is asking unusual questions about our reactor specifications." Before Vex could respond, another voice interrupted. "Captain, this is Security Chief Braun. The humans in my section want to know about our weapons systems and defensive capabilities." Vex felt a chill run down his spine. "Medical to the bridge. Dr. Yith, how are the humans adapting to our atmosphere?" "Remarkably well, Captain. Better than any species we've encountered. Their physiology seems almost adaptable. And, sir, their medical scans show some concerning anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" "Their bone density is nearly twice what we calculated for their gravity well. Their muscle efficiency ratings are off our charts. And, Captain, every single one of them shows evidence of previously healed injuries that should have been fatal." Vex looked out at the stars, wondering what exactly the Galactic Union had invited aboard their ships. Humanity had passed all the standard tests for civilization and intelligence. They had demonstrated art, culture, and philosophy. They had shown they could be reasoned with. But as the first day progressed and reports continued to stream in about human curiosity regarding ship operations, weapons, and defensive systems, Vex began to suspect that the galaxy's newest members might be far more than they appeared. The humans weren't just adaptable, they were studying everything, learning everything, preparing for something. The question was, what? 3 weeks into the joint mission, the Nexus Dawn received a priority distress signal from the Outer Rim. A research station orbiting the gas, giant Kepler-7 had gone dark during a routine survey mission. The area was known for unpredictable spatial anomalies and gravitational fluctuations that made rescue operations extremely hazardous. Captain Vex called an emergency briefing. The holographic display showed Kepler-7's violent orange storms and the precarious position of Research Station Omega, built into an asteroid caught in the planet's gravitational well. The last transmission indicated a catastrophic system failure, Vex explained to his mixed crew of Alterians, Kenth, and humans. Standard protocol requires us to approach at minimum safe distance and deploy rescue drones. Chief Engineer Clox's tentacles writhed nervously. Captain, the gravitational shears would destroy any drone within 1,000 kilometers of the station. We may have to accept that the research team is lost. Captain Morrison stepped forward. Permission to speak, sir? Vex nodded, curious about the human perspective. My people have experience with high-risk rescue operations in hostile environments. We'd like to volunteer for a direct approach. The bridge fell silent. Navigation Officer Nira's chromatophores flashed alarmed colors. Captain Morrison, the gravitational forces would tear apart any shuttle. Even our most heavily shielded rescue pods wouldn't survive. Morrison's expression didn't change. We understand the risks, but there might be survivors on that station. 47 researchers from 6 different species. We can't abandon them without trying. Humans, Morrison continued, addressing his crew. Who's with me? Without hesitation, every human on the bridge stepped forward. Engineer Lisa Park spoke. Up. We've been studying your shuttle designs. With some modifications, we think we can build something that might survive the approach. Pilot Tom Reed nodded. I've been running simulations. It's not impossible, just really difficult. Vex was astounded. The humans weren't just volunteering for a suicide mission. They were treating it like a puzzle to be solved. The mathematics alone suggest a less than 12% survival probability. Morrison shrugged, a gesture Vex had learned indicated human indifference to poor odds. We've worked with worse. Over the next 6 hours, Vex watched in fascination as the humans transformed one of the ship's shuttles. They stripped out everything, non-essential, reinforced the hull with salvaged materials, and jury-rigged additional shielding that shouldn't have worked according to Alterian engineering principles. Captain, Dr. Yith reported privately, I've been monitoring the humans during this preparation. Their stress hormones have actually decreased as the danger increased. This is completely contrary to every known biological response pattern. The modified shuttle, which the humans had dubbed the Long Shot, launched 12 hours later with Morrison and 3 volunteers aboard. Vex watched the tactical display as the tiny craft dove toward Kepler-7, threading between gravitational anomalies that would have crushed a standard vessel. How are they doing this? Whispered Navigation Officer Nira. The human pilot's voice crackled over the comm. Nexus Dawn, we have visual on the station. It looks like they've lost main power and life support, but the structure is intact. We're seeing movement through the viewports. Against all odds, the Longshot docked with the research station. 20 minutes later, Morrison's voice returned. Nexus Dawn, we have 31 survivors. Repeat, 31 survivors. Station was sealed. For emergency, but they're running low on air. Beginning evacuation now. The rescue took 4 trips. Each time, the Longshot carried more passengers than it was designed for. The humans somehow making it work through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. By the time the last load of survivors was brought aboard the Nexus Dawn, word of the impossible rescue had spread throughout the ship. That evening, Vex found Morrison in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. Captain, I must ask, how did you know you could succeed? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. We didn't know, sir. But on Earth, we have a saying. Nobody left behind. Sometimes you don't do something because you know you can succeed. You do it because it's right, and you figure out how to succeed along the way. Vex realized then that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their resilience. It was their refusal to accept that some things were impossible. The trouble started in engineering, as troubles often do aboard starships. Chief, Engineer Clox was conducting his daily inspection when he noticed human engineer Lisa Park elbow-deep in the quantum resonance chamber, a device that required specialized tools and 3 safety technicians according to regulation. Park! Clox's voice echoed through the engine room, his tentacles writhing in alarm. Step away from the resonance chamber immediately! Lisa emerged, her face streaked with coolant fluid and a grin that Clox had learned to fear. Morning, Chief. I think I figured out why we've been getting those power fluctuations. Clox approached cautiously. The humans had been aboard for 6 weeks now, and in that time they had managed to improve nearly every system they touched. Officially, these improvements violated dozens of safety protocols. Unofficially, they had increased ship efficiency by 37%. The problem, Lisa continued, wiping her hands on a rag, is that your power distribution matrix is running a nested feedback loop through the tertiary coupling arrays. Simple fix. We just need to bypass the redundancy checks and reroute power through the auxiliary conduits. Every word of that sentence made Clox's primary heart skip a beat. Lisa, those redundancy checks exist for a reason. The auxiliary conduits aren't rated for primary power loads, and the resonance chamber requires a complete shutdown to— Already done, Lisa said cheerfully. Power efficiency is up another 8%. Also, I may have accidentally figured out how to increase our maximum warp factor. Before Clox could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the engine room in red, and Captain Vex's voice echoed over the comm system. All hands to stations. We have detected 3 raider vessels approaching, on an intercept course. Time to contact, 47 minutes. Clox felt his secondary heart stop entirely. The raiders were the galaxy's most feared pirates, ruthless, well-armed, and notorious for leaving no survivors. The Nexus Dawn was a research vessel, lightly armed and definitely not equipped for combat. Chief, Morrison's voice came through. The comm. We need everything you can give us. Maximum power to engines and weapons. Captain Morrison, Clox replied, his voice tight with stress. Our weapons systems can't sustain combat power for more than 20 minutes, and our engines are already at maximum rated output. There was a pause. Then, what about maximum human-rated output? Clox looked at Lisa, who was already moving toward the power distribution controls with that terrifying human expression of determination. Chief, she said, remember when I mentioned, I figured out how to increase our warp factor? Lisa, no. The structural stress alone would, trust me. Those 2 words, Clox had learned, were the most dangerous phrase in the human language. Over the next 30 minutes, Lisa and the other human engineers performed what could only be described as mechanical sorcery. They rerouted power through systems never designed to carry it, bypassed safety protocols that had protected starships for millennia, and somehow convinced the ship's ancient engines to produce power outputs that violated several laws of physics. Nexus Dawn, to all vessels, Captain Vex announced over the ship-wide comm. Brace for emergency acceleration. The ship lurched forward with such force that even the inertial dampeners couldn't completely compensate. Through the engine room's viewport, Clox watched stars blur into lines as the Nexus Dawn achieved velocities no ship of her class had ever reached. Raiders are falling behind, came the report from the bridge. They can't match our speed. But Lisa wasn't finished. Chief, we've got power to spare now. What do you say we give our weapons a little extra juice? Lisa, the plasma cannons will overload if we exceed rated power by more than 15%, I know. Good thing we're only going to exceed it by 30. The raiders, perhaps sensing that their prey was more dangerous than anticipated, attempted to flee. They discovered that the Nexus Dawn's suddenly supercharged weapons had nearly twice their normal range and 3 times their normal power output. After the brief engagement, Clox found himself staring at readouts that should have been impossible. Every system was running beyond its design specifications, yet somehow everything was working perfectly. Lisa, he said finally, how did you know this would work? She shrugged in that uniquely human way. I didn't. Not completely. But humans have been making machines work better than they're supposed to for thousands of years. Sometimes you just have to believe in your equipment and push it to see what it can really do. Clox realized that humans didn't just think outside conventional parameters. They seemed to operate in a reality where conventional parameters were merely suggestions. Dr. Yeath had served as chief medical officer aboard the Nexus Dawn for over 2 decades, treating dozens of species and managing medical crises that would challenge even the most experienced practitioners. But nothing in her training had prepared her for treating humans. The crisis began when the ship encountered a rogue dark matter field that damaged the environmental systems. Within hours, atmospheric processors began failing, and toxic gases started seeping into the life support systems. Medical emergency on Deck 7, came the urgent call. Multiple casualties from gas exposure. Yeath rushed to the scene with her medical team, expecting to find the usual symptoms of atmospheric poisoning: respiratory distress, neurological damage, and systemic organ failure. What she found instead defied medical logic. The affected crew, members, a mix of Alterians, Kenth, and 3 humans, were displaying wildly different symptoms. The Alterians were unconscious, their breathing labored and their chromatophores flickering erratically. The Kenth were experiencing seizures as the toxic compounds attacked their neural pathways. The humans were standing. Not just standing. They were carrying their unconscious crewmates to safety, apparently unaffected by gas concentrations that should have killed them within minutes. "Human Dave," Yith called to the nearest human. "You need immediate treatment. The gas exposure?" Dave looked up from where he was applying emergency oxygen to an Alterian officer. "Doc, I feel fine. Maybe a little dizzy, but nothing serious. These guys need help more than I do." Yith's medical scanner told a different story. Dave's blood chemistry showed toxin levels that should have resulted in immediate cardiac arrest. His cellular oxygen levels were critically low, and his metabolic functions were operating at 60% of normal. He should have been dead. "Dave, you need to understand. The readings I'm getting suggest severe systemic poisoning. You should be unconscious." Dave shrugged, continuing his first aid efforts. "Yeah, I don't feel great, but I felt worse. Remember that shore leave on Risa when we ate those fermented sea slugs?" Over the next several hours, as the environmental systems were repaired, Yith observed the human response to toxic exposure with growing amazement. While other species required intensive medical intervention and would need weeks to recover, the humans simply adapted. Their liver and kidney functions increased dramatically, processing toxins at rates that should have caused organ failure. Their bone marrow began producing red blood cells at 3 times the normal rate. Most remarkably, their brain chemistry actively compensated for the neurological effects of the gas exposure. "Doctor," human medic Anna Torres approached her during the crisis. "I know this might sound strange, but I think I can help with the Kenth patients." Yith looked at Anna skeptically. "You have no training in Kenth physiology." "No, but I've been studying the scans. Their neural architecture is similar to certain Earth species that respond well to electrical stimulation therapy. If we modulate the frequency of your neural stabilizer." Anna was right. The modified treatment worked perfectly, stabilizing the Kenth patients within minutes. Later, as Yith compiled her medical report, she called Anna to her office. "I need to understand something," Yith began. "How did you know that treatment would work? You've never treated Kenth neural poisoning before." Anna sat down, looking thoughtful. "On Earth, we have a concept called pattern recognition. When you've seen enough medical cases, you start to notice similarities across different conditions. The Kenth neural damage looked similar to certain Earth neurological disorders, so I extrapolated. But the risk, if you had been wrong, you could have killed them." "But I wasn't wrong," Anna replied simply. "Sometimes in medicine, you have to trust your instincts and act on incomplete information. Every Earth medic learns that. We call it practicing medicine for a reason. You're never finished learning." Yith realized that human medical practice wasn't just about treating known conditions. It was about recognizing patterns, adapting treatments, and making intuitive leaps that somehow worked. "Anna, can you explain how your species survived exposure to toxins that killed the others?" Anna smiled. "Evolution. Earth isn't exactly the safest planet in the galaxy. Toxic plants, venomous animals, poisonous gases from volcanic activity. Humans, who couldn't handle a little poison, didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. We're basically the descendants of the toughest, most adaptable survivors from a world that spent millions of years trying to kill us." That night, Yith updated her medical protocols. For the first time in her career, she added a new classification to her patient database. Humans, treat as necessary, expect impossible recovery times. She was beginning to understand that humans didn't just survive. They thrived in conditions that would destroy other species. Ambassador Thane of the Rigelian Diplomatic Corps had negotiated peace treaties across 17 sectors and mediated conflicts between species with completely incompatible physiologies. His reputation for maintaining galactic stability was legendary, which made the current situation all the more frustrating. He was losing a diplomatic negotiation to humans who weren't even professional diplomats. The crisis had begun when the Nexus Dawn was selected to mediate a territorial dispute between the Vorthon Empire and the Galactic Federation. Both species had claimed mining rights to a strategically important asteroid belt, and their growing fleets were positioning for what could become the galaxy's next major war. The Vorthans are demanding exclusive mining rights based on their historical presence in the sector, Ambassador Thane explained to the mixed human-alien mediation team. The Kalani claim priority based on their technological surveys of the asteroids. Both positions have legal merit under different interpretations of galactic law. Captain Morrison nodded thoughtfully. What do both sides actually need from these asteroids? The question was so simple that Thane almost missed its significance. In 2 decades of diplomatic training, he had been taught to focus on legal precedents, territorial claims, and political face-saving measures. He had never simply asked what the parties actually needed. The Vorthans require the rare minerals for their energy grid, he replied slowly. The Kalani need the same minerals for their terraforming projects. Human diplomat Emma Clark, who had been assigned to the team despite having no formal diplomatic training, leaned forward. So they both need the same resources, but for different purposes. How much do they each need? Thane consulted his datapad. The Vorthans require approximately 30% of the estimated mineral output. The Kalani need roughly 40%. That's only 70%, Emma observed. What happens to the other 30% in current proposals? It remains in dispute for future allocation. Emma smiled in that unsettling human way. Ambassador Thane, with respect, I think we're approaching this backwards. Over the next 3 days, Emma and the human team completely restructured the negotiations. Instead of focusing on territorial claims, they organized joint technical sessions where Vorthan energy engineers met with Kalani terraforming specialists. Instead of dividing the asteroid belt geographically, they proposed dividing it functionally, based on mineral composition and extraction requirements. Most surprisingly, they suggested something that violated every diplomatic protocol Thane knew. They brought the actual working scientists and engineers into the negotiation room with the political leaders. This is highly irregular, Thane protested. Diplomatic? Negotiations are conducted between authorized political representatives, not technical personnel. Captain Morrison looked at him with that direct human gaze. Ambassador, with all due respect, how many wars have started because diplomats made agreements that their people couldn't actually implement? The breakthrough came when Dr. Vex, a Vorthan energy specialist, realized that the Kalani terraforming process produced a waste byproduct that could significantly improve Vorthan energy efficiency. Simultaneously, Commander Kayla of the Kelani discovered that Vorthan energy extraction techniques could be adapted to accelerate their terraforming timeline. They don't just both need the asteroid belt, Emma announced to the stunned negotiation room. They need each other. What had begun as a territorial dispute became the foundation for the most significant interspecies cooperation agreement in recent galactic history. The Vorthans and Kalani didn't just agree to share the asteroid belt. They formed a joint development partnership that increased efficiency for both species, while creating a template for similar agreements across the galaxy. Ambassador Thane found himself filing a report that challenged everything he thought he knew about diplomacy. The humans approached this dispute not as a zero-sum competition for resources, but as a problem-solving exercise, he wrote. They seemed to instinctively understand that the best diplomatic solutions create value for all parties rather than simply dividing existing value. That evening, he approached Emma in the ship's common area. I must ask, where did you learn these negotiation techniques? Emma looked up from the human game she was playing with several crew members. I didn't learn them anywhere special. This is just how humans tend to approach problems. We're not very good at accepting that problems don't have solutions. But your methods violated established diplomatic protocols. Emma nodded. Sometimes you have to break the rules to get to the right answer. On Earth, we have a saying. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Thane realized that humans didn't just think differently about problems. They refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable. They approached diplomacy the same way they approached engineering or medicine, with the assumption that there had to be a better way and the determination to find it. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps quietly began incorporating human problem-solving methodologies into their training curriculum. Fleet Admiral Korax had commanded battleships for over 4 centuries and had never encountered an enemy he couldn't understand. The Draktar hegemony, however, was testing that confidence. The insectoid species had emerged from the galactic rim with technology that seemed to defy conventional military analysis. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics completely unpredictable. In 3 months, they had conquered 7 star systems, and their fleet was now approaching the strategic hub of New Geneva. "Our conventional forces are outmatched," Admiral Corax reported to the Emergency War Council aboard the dreadnought Sovereign. "Draktar vessels appear to be individually superior to our ships in every measurable category." Captain Morrison, representing the human contingent, studied the tactical displays with his usual unsettling intensity. "Admiral, what's their pattern? How do they choose targets, coordinate attacks, organize their formations?" "That's the problem," Corax replied, his frustration evident. "They don't appear to follow any recognizable military doctrine. Their attacks seem random, almost chaotic." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "Permission to review combat recordings with my team?" Over the next 18 hours, the humans analyzed every available piece of data from the Draktar encounters. They studied not just the tactics, but the timing, the positioning, the apparent decision-making processes of the enemy fleet. When they returned to the War Council, human strategic analyst Mike Chen presented their findings. "Admiral, the Draktar aren't using chaotic tactics," Mike announced. "They're using swarm tactics." The alien officers around the table looked confused. Corax leaned forward. "Explain." "On Earth, we've studied swarm intelligence for centuries. Insects like ants or bees can accomplish incredibly complex tasks, not through central planning, but through simple rules that create emergent behavior. The Draktar aren't operating as a traditional hierarchical military. They're operating as a swarm." Morrison stepped forward. "Each Draktar ship follows a few basic rules. Stay close to the group, move toward the enemy, avoid collisions. When thousands of ships follow these simple rules simultaneously, they create complex behaviors that look random but are actually highly effective." "Impossible," Admiral Corax protested. "Military coordination requires command structure, communication protocols, strategic planning." "Not if you're a hive mind," Morrison replied. "Admiral, I don't think the Draktar have individual ship commanders making tactical decisions. I think they have a collective intelligence controlling all their ships simultaneously." The implications were staggering. Conventional military tactics assumed individual ship commanders who could be confused, deceived, or outmaneuvered. But how do you outmaneuver a collective intelligence that controls thousands of ships as easily as a human controls their fingers? "So how do we fight them?" Corax asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "The same way humans learned to fight swarms on Earth. You don't try to outmaneuver the swarm. You disrupt the swarm behavior." The humans proposed a radical tactical approach. Instead of engaging the Draktar fleet directly, they would create multiple simultaneous disruptions across a wide area. Small groups of fast ships would strike at seemingly random targets, forcing the swarm to divide its attention and break its coordination. "You're suggesting we abandon formation flying and operate as independent units," Corax said incredulously. "That violates every principle of fleet tactics." "Admiral," Morrison replied, "every principle of fleet tactics assumes you're fighting other fleets. We're not fighting a fleet. We're fighting a single organism that happens to be distributed across thousands of ships." The Battle of New Geneva became a textbook example of adaptive military thinking. The combined human-alien fleet abandoned traditional formations and engaged in what observers described as organized chaos. Small groups of ships struck at Draktar formations from multiple angles simultaneously, preventing the swarm from achieving coherent responses. The humans had somehow intuited that the key to defeating a hive mind wasn't superior firepower. It was forcing the collective intelligence to process more information than it could handle effectively. When the Draktar fleet finally retreated, they left behind 1,500 destroyed ships, and more importantly, the first tactical defeat of their expansion campaign. Admiral Corax found Morrison on the observation deck after the battle. "Captain, I need to understand something. How did your species develop anti-swarm tactics without ever encountering a spacefaring hive mind?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Draktar fleet. "Admiral, humans have been fighting swarms for our entire evolutionary history. Insects, bacteria, viruses, even social movements and economic systems that behave like swarms. We learned long ago that sometimes the best way to fight something isn't to be stronger. It's to understand how it thinks, and then think differently. Korax realized that humanity's greatest military asset wasn't their weapons or their courage. It was their ability to analyze any enemy and develop counter-tactics that hadn't existed before. The galaxy's military academies began teaching courses in human tactical innovation within 6 months. 6 months after their assignment began, the humans aboard the Nexus Dawn received orders to return to Earth for debriefing and reassignment. The news spread through the ship with an unexpected sense of loss that surprised many of the alien crew members. Captain Vex stood in the shuttle bay, watching the humans pack their equipment with typical efficiency. Over the past months, they had transformed not just the ship's operations, but the crew's understanding of what was possible. "Captain Morrison," Vex approached the human commander. "I wanted to speak with you before your departure." Morrison looked up from securing a crate of modified tools that hadn't existed when the humans first came aboard. "Of course, Captain. I hope our service has been satisfactory." "Satisfactory," Vex repeated, his translator struggling with the understatement. "Captain, your species has revolutionized everything you've touched. Our engineering efficiency is up 60%, our medical protocols have been completely rewritten, and our diplomatic success rate has doubled. The tactical innovations alone will change how the galaxy approaches military conflict." Morrison nodded, but Vex detected something in his expression, a carefully controlled emotion that the captain recognized as sadness. "Will you miss this assignment?" Vex asked. "We all will," Morrison replied honestly. "This has been educational. We've learned as much from all of you as you have from us." Chief Engineer Clocks approached, his tentacles drooping in what Vex had learned was the equivalent of melancholy. "Lisa, I wanted to thank you for the power efficiency modifications. And, well, for teaching me that engineering specifications are more like guidelines than absolute limits." Lisa Park grinned. "Clocks, you're going to do fine. Just remember, if it's not working the way it should, there's probably a better way to make it work. Don't be afraid to experiment." Across the shuttle bay, similar conversations were taking place. Dr. Yith was discussing medical techniques with Anna Torres. Ambassador Thane was reviewing diplomatic protocols with Emma Clark. The humans weren't just leaving. They were transferring knowledge that would ripple across the galaxy for generations. "Captain Vex," Morrison said quietly, "I want you to know that this assignment has changed us too. We came here thinking we were just fulfilling a diplomatic obligation. We're leaving with a much better understanding of our place in the galaxy." "What do you mean?" Morrison gestured toward his crew, who were saying goodbye to alien colleagues they had come to consider friends. "We thought we were different because we're adaptive and resilient. But every species we've met has their own strengths, their own ways of solving problems. The Alterians' systematic approach to engineering, the Kenth's intuitive understanding of complex systems, the Kalani's patience with long-term projects. We've learned from all of you." "Then what makes humans unique?" Vex asked. Morrison considered the question for a long moment. "I think we're uniquely good at learning from other species and combining different approaches. We don't just adapt to new situations. We synthesize solutions from everything we've experienced. We're not the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced species in the galaxy. But maybe we're the best at helping everyone else be better than they thought they could be." As the human transport ship prepared to depart, Captain Vex received an unexpected communication from Galactic Command. "Captain Vex, this is Admiral Thyron. We've reviewed the reports from your joint mission. The performance improvements and innovations documented during the human integration period have exceeded all projections." "Yes, sir. The humans have been remarkable. Which is why we're expanding the program. Every major galactic Navy vessel will be assigned a human crew contingent within the next year. Additionally, we're establishing permanent human liaison positions in the Diplomatic Corps, Engineering Command, and Medical Division." Vex looked out at the human transport ship, already growing small against the stars. "Sir, I believe that's an excellent decision." That evening, as the Nexus Dawn continued its patrol route, Vex found himself in the observation lounge where Morrison had often sat during quiet moments. The view was the same, distant stars scattered across the infinite black. But somehow, it looked different now, more full of possibility. His communication officer, Nira, joined him at the viewport. "Captain, do you think we'll see them again?" "I think," Vex replied, "that we'll be seeing a lot more of humans in the years to come. They've shown us that the galaxy is a much more interesting place when different species work together to solve problems that none of us could solve alone." Through the viewport, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if reflecting the knowledge that somewhere among them, humans were already planning their next impossible project. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Vex realized, was exactly what made humans so remarkable. They didn't just adapt to the universe around them, they made it better. End of Humans Aboard, a collection of HFY tales.